Hi Internet, I'm Ariel, and welcome to the first episode of Hybrid Bake's West Meets East edition. So for this sub-series, I've compiled two lists, one of Western desserts and one of Eastern desserts. I'm letting my computer randomly select one dessert from each list, and it'll be my job to combine the two into one hybrid treat. As you saw in the previous scene, my computer has asked me to hybridize cookie salad with fruit sando. I know what fruit sando is. It's a Japanese dessert that's essentially just whipped cream and fruit sandwiched between two white pieces of bread. But what in the world is cookie salad? Cookie salad is a Minnesota standard. Specifically, it is a Minnesota Lutheran standard and belongs to a class of desserts known as dessert salads. These salads are typically comprised of shelf-stable items like packaged cookies or canned fruit, suspended in pudding, Cool Whip, and/or Jell-O. You've heard of cookie salads before, think ambrosia or glorified rice. Cookie salad specifically is made from a combination of instant vanilla pudding mix, buttermilk, canned mandarin oranges, Cool Whip, and fudge-striped shortbread cookies. But how does one even come up with these zany combinations that we see in dessert salads? One simple and arguably lazy hypothesis is that these salads are holdovers from the 1960s, when Jell-O was king and everyone seemed to have lost their minds, culinarily. But Dan Nosowitz of Atlas Obscura thinks that there's more to the story, arguing that dessert salads are a prime example of an immigrant culture colliding with the new world of American convenience and resulting in something very weird. The immigrant culture in this case being Scandinavian. Thanks to a wave of immigration in the mid-19th and 20th century, Minnesota culture remains heavily Scandinavian, apparent in its present-day Lutheran church culture. And in his article, Nosowitz argues that it's not hard to connect dessert salads to more traditional Scandinavian cuisine, one example being risotto alla Malta, which is a combination of cold rice porridge, whipped cream, and oranges. So, this is an important lesson in suppressing your inner food snob and not dismissing something just because it has prepackaged or processed foods. So here are the ingredients you need to make cookie salad. There's really not much to this recipe. You hydrate the instant vanilla pudding powder with buttermilk, then fold in the Cool Whip, drained mandarin oranges, and cookie pieces. You can eat the salad as is or place it in the fridge for a few hours to chill. Okay, so I'd be lying if I said I wasn't initially biased against cookie salad. It's a bunch of random sweet things suspended in sweet fluff. But it's pretty good.
Of course it's good.
Mainly because it's random sweet things suspended in sweet fluff.
It's light.
It's very light. It's like Cool Whip.
Yeah.
But after the third bite, it does become cloyingly sweet. When you take a bite, you're met with several textures: crunch from the cookie pieces, a burst of sweetened citrus from the mandarin oranges, and a smooth fluffiness from the instant pudding, buttermilk, Cool Whip combo. So I prefer the salad after it's been refrigerated for a few hours, giving the cookies a chance to soften and their flavors to permeate the pudding mixture. And it's even more delicious when it's been sitting in the freezer for a few hours. It has the same texture as ice cream. I don't have any footage of this because Tom ate it all.
Oh, don't go around the bus on that.
You did eat it all!
Good weeks. You throw me under the bus.
Okay, let's segue into talking about fruit sando. It's fresh fruit and whipped cream sandwiched between two slices of Japanese milk bread known as shokupan. The origin of the fruit sando is contested, with two groups claiming that it was their invention. I think the more interesting topic here are the two things holding the sandwich together. The story of how bread made a name for itself in Japan is actually quite interesting. Bread was introduced to Japan by Portuguese traders and missionaries in the 16th century, but any toehold bread made was lost a century later when Japan closed its borders to purge itself of foreign influences. It wasn't until 1945, after the end of World War II, that bread gained traction among the Japanese general public. Japan was suffering from severe food shortages, and the United States, the occupying authority, sent a huge amount of wheat and powdered milk to Japan as relief supplies. With rice hard to come by, bread became an integral part of the Japanese diet. The most ubiquitous type of bread in Japan is the white, pillowy, square-shaped bread called shokupan, which translates to eating bread. This is the bread that's typically used to make fruit sando. The ideal texture for the crumb of a shokupan is what the Japanese called mochi, soft but chewy. For my reference fruit sando, I'll be baking this shokupan recipe by Umi's Baking, which makes use of the tongdong method. The Tongzhong method involves heating a small percentage of the flour and liquid in a bread recipe to around 150 degrees Fahrenheit before combining the resulting thick slurry with the remaining ingredients. Using this method allegedly leads to a fluffier, moister, plusher, more pliable loaf of bread that stays that way for days. Okay, so technically here's what's happening. When you heat that small portion of water and flour together, you're gelatinizing the starches in the flour. You'll often see people refer to this as pre-gelatinizing the starches because starch gelatinization normally happens in the oven. By pre-gelatinizing a portion of the flour, you're able to increase the hydration of the overall dough without creating a sticky mess because pre-gelatinized starch holds on to water more effectively than raw flour. To make my reference strawberry fruit sando, I first made my shokupan, and here are the ingredients you need to make this bread. For brevity, I won't narrate the entire shokupan recipe, just know that I made the gelatinized starch mixture, mix it in with the other shokupan ingredients, allow the dough to bulk ferment, portion the dough into 3 equal portions, then shape the portions into tight coils as instructed by Umi's baking, and allow the dough to proof a second time in a loaf pan. Kitchen Princess Bamboo says when making a square shokupan, you want to let the dough rise until there's a 1 centimeter headspace. This was my dough after 60 minutes of proofing at around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. The dough's been adequately proofed, but there's still a 3.5 centimeter headspace. Clearly, Umi's recipe didn't make enough dough for my specific pan size. She actually doesn't specify pan size in her recipe. Regardless, I placed a greased sheet pan on top of the loaf pan, weighed it down with something heavy, and baked it off at 390 degrees Fahrenheit for 35 minutes.
Hello. Oh, that's so cute.
I let my shokupan cool overnight, then sliced the bread into approximately 2 centimeter thick slices. You'll notice here that I'm not using a serrated knife to cut the loaf. I find that a super sharp knife works just as well. Working on one sandwich at a time, I piped a layer of whipped cream on both sides of shokupan, arranged my strawberries, primarily focusing on the pattern along the diagonal, filled the empty spaces with more whipped cream, sandwiched the 2 slices together, wrapped the sandwich firmly with plastic wrap, then stored the sandwich in the fridge with something weighing the sandwich down for about an hour. At the 1 hour mark, I removed the sandwich from the fridge, trimmed off the edges, then cut along the diagonal to reveal a beautiful pattern. You know, I definitely see the appeal in these sandwiches. It's a simple, decorative way to deliver whipped cream and strawberries into your mouth. But I do have some complaints. It's pretty obvious that one of the main objectives of this dessert is to achieve a visually stunning cross-section, even if it means compromising on eatability.
But the cream is very good.
It's a little messy.
Yes, it's a little messy. As a sandwich, it's a bit unwieldy in its size.
The average mouth span clocks in around 5 centimeters. This sandwich, along with other variants I've seen online, have a thickness of more than 6 centimeters. So there's really no way to take a proper bite of the sandwich without also making a big mess and extruding whipped cream everywhere. It's not bad. Could use more fruit though.
I was just going to say, I almost wish the strawberries were in smaller pieces.
You want more strawberry?
Yeah, just a little piece of strawberry.
Yeah. But these fruit sandwiches are delicious and they're super fun and cute. The tartness of the strawberry pairs really well with the lightly sweetened cream, and the shokupan is soft yet chewy. Okay, so admittedly, I got a little lucky with this assignment. You know, these 2 desserts lend themselves to being easily hybridized. And here are my ideas. Replace the whipped cream and the fruit sando with cookie salad fluff, and use mandarin oranges as the fruit centerpiece rather than strawberries. I'm going to cut the mandarins in half along the axes rather than using whole mandarins to make the sandwiches more manageable to eat. Also, rather than sandwiching all of this between 2 plain slices of white shokupan, I'm going to use 2 slices of chocolate striped shokupan, alluding to the Keebler striped fudge cookies in a cookie salad. One question that I struggled with was how to incorporate actual cookies into the sandwich. Initially, I was toying with the idea of making a cookie butter out of the cookies that I could spread onto the shokupan, and I actually did make this cookie butter, but then it occurred to me that fruit sandos are refrigerated and consumed as a chilled treat, rendering the cookie butter not very pleasant to eat. Who wants to eat cold butter? So I nicked that idea and decided to incorporate the cookies into the vanilla pudding whipped cream mixture, just like you would if you were making regular cookie salad. So the first thing we need to make is the chocolate striped shokupan. And this is exactly why those reference bakes are so important. From the shokupan reference baked, I learned 2 things. 1, the recipe I was using didn't yield enough raw dough to fill my particular pan. And 2, a baking temperature of 390 degrees Fahrenheit is too high of a temperature. After doing a few calculations, I determined that I needed to increase the shokupan recipe by 38%. So I whipped up a larger batch of shokupan dough, divided the dough into 2 equal portions, left one portion as is, and for the other portion, I kneaded in a mixture of Dutch cocoa powder and water. If you do end up making this hybrid, here's a word of warning. It'll be a little messy when incorporating the Dutch cocoa powder, but just keep working the dough with the heel of your hand and eventually you'll get one homogeneous mixture. I let both dough portions rise for about 40 minutes, and after that, I punched the doughs down and divided each color into 3 equal portions. To create the striped effect, I rolled out 1 chocolate ball and 1 plain ball, transferred the flattened chocolate dough onto the flattened plain dough, then carefully and tightly rolled the combined dough onto itself, pinching the edges to seal. You can see that the dough is pretty wet. It has a hydration level of about 68%, so definitely feel free to use some flour to help during the shaping, but try not to use too much flour because you still need the dough to be able to stick onto itself, especially when you're rolling it into a tight coil. I placed the form rolls into a greased loaf pan and let it rise until only a 1 centimeter headspace remained. I fit my makeshift lid onto the loaf pan before popping it into a 350-degree oven for 40 minutes. So, 10 minutes into the bake, I realized that 5 pounds is definitely not heavy enough to counteract the force generated by the dough's oven spring. Here's me scrambling to add more weight onto the bread. After 40 minutes of baking, I removed the bread from the oven and the loaf pan and allowed it to completely cool before cutting it into slices. You can see that even though I rolled each ball quite neatly and in the same way, there's a lot of variability in the swirl pattern. Now that that's done, I moved on to making the pudding filling, which was just as easy as making the cookie salad, but rather than using Cool Whip, I opted to use sweetened whipped cream so that I could control the sugar content and save it from being sickly sweet. After folding together the instant pudding mix, buttermilk, and whipped cream, I finished the mixture off by folding in super finely chopped Keebler fudge striped cookies, about 20 grams. I experimented with larger cookie pieces, but not only was the mixture difficult to pipe, it also interfered with the sandwich's structural integrity. Okay, so with everything prepared, I constructed the hybrid using the same method as the fruit Sando and chilled them in the fridge for 1 hour before cutting off the crust and revealing the cross-section. Isn't this just adorable? I mean, it's still challenging to eat, as you can see here.
That cookie salad filling is delicious.
Thank you. Alright. It's raining cookie salad, but overall it's delightful and delicious. The slight bitterness of the chocolate in the chocopan pairs really nicely with the sweetness of the filling, and the mandarin oranges offer a burst of fresh, citrusy goodness. My only complaint has to do with the texture of the mandarin oranges. They are definitely more fibrous than their canned counterparts, which does detract a little from the whole eating experience. Ideally, I want to be biting into a tender piece of fruit, not a fibery one. One route to explore in future iterations is to use canned mandarin oranges, and to achieve that visually striking cross-section, you could cobble together 5 orange wedges to form half an orange. And I think that's totally doable because you could use the cookie salad fluff as glue. Something worth noting is that the crust is a little difficult to cut off, and you do end up squeezing out some of the filling. If you don't mind eating the crust, then you're more than welcome to skip this edge cutting step. It's not uncommon and won't really change the texture drastically since the chocopan does have a pale and soft crust. So there we have it, a cookie salad fruit Sando hybrid, which I highly recommend you try. If you'd like to have a go at this hybrid, you can find the full recipe following the link in the description. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something new, be sure to subscribe. All right, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.